Welcome to the very first lesson of your journey from no experience to a Tier 2 helpdesk technician. Today we build the foundation everything else rests on: what a computer actually is, how hardware and software work together, and exactly what happens from the moment you press the power button until the desktop appears. Take it slowly. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to describe a computer with confidence. Let's start with the biggest idea in computing. A computer is two things working together. Hardware is the physical equipment you can touch, like the processor, the memory, and the screen. Software is the set of instructions that tells that hardware what to do, like the operating system and your apps. A nice way to remember it: hardware is the body, software is the thoughts. As a helpdesk tech, one of your first questions is always, is this a hardware problem or a software problem? No matter how big or small, every computer follows the same simple loop. Input, where data comes in from the keyboard or mouse. Process, where the CPU does the calculations. Output, where the results go out to the screen or speakers. And storage, where data is kept. A calculator, a phone, and a giant server all follow this exact same pattern. Learn this loop and you understand the heart of computing. Nearly every machine has four essential parts. The CPU, or processor, does the actual work. The RAM, or memory, is a fast temporary workspace for whatever is running right now. Storage, like a hard drive or solid-state drive, keeps your files even when the power is off. And the motherboard is the main board that connects everything together, fed by the power supply. We'll open each of these up in the lessons ahead. For now, just learn the names. So you press the power button. What runs first? Not Windows, not your apps. The first code to run is the firmware that lives on a chip on the motherboard. On older machines this is called the BIOS, and on modern machines it's called UEFI. Think of firmware as the caretaker who unlocks the building before the manager arrives. It runs before any operating system exists. The next thing the firmware does is run something called POST, which stands for Power On Self-Test. This is a quick health check that confirms the essential hardware, like the RAM and the CPU, is present and working. If something is wrong, you'll often hear a pattern of beeps, called beep codes, or see an error message on screen. Here's a useful clue: if a PC fails during POST, before you ever see Windows, the problem is almost always hardware. Once POST passes, the firmware looks for the boot device, which is usually your main drive. On that drive it finds a small program called the bootloader, whose only job is to start the operating system. If you've ever booted a PC from a USB stick, that's you telling the firmware to use a different boot device. You can change this order inside the firmware settings, which you reach by tapping a key like Del or F2 right after powering on. Now the operating system, like Windows, takes over. If firmware was the caretaker, the operating system is the manager who actually runs the place. It loads drivers so it can talk to your hardware. It manages the memory and the CPU and the storage, and finally it presents the login screen and the desktop you actually use. From this point on, almost everything you touch is software running on top of the OS. Let's make this real. When your PC starts, tap a key like Del or F2 to peek at the firmware screen, then exit without changing anything. Once Windows loads, open PowerShell and run the command on screen. It uses system info piped into Finster to pull out just the OS name, the system type, and the BIOS version. Don't worry about the exact syntax yet, just see that the tools to inspect your machine are right there waiting for you. Let's recap. A computer is hardware, the physical parts, and software, the instructions. Every computer follows the loop of input, process, output, and storage. And when you press power, the order is: power flows in, firmware runs, POST checks the hardware, the bootloader loads, and then the operating system takes over. Your task before the next lesson: watch a computer boot and narrate the stages out loud, peek at the firmware screen, then run the system info command in PowerShell and write down what you find. Great start! I'll see you in lesson 2, where we open the case.